Hello to MOS Live. My name is Sarah and my pronouns are she and her, and I will be your moderator today for this Ask a Scientist all about dinosaurs. If you are watching us on Facebook or YouTube, unfortunately, we can't see your questions from those platforms. But if you are here on Zoom, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions you have on dinosaurs. If we ask your question and you would like a shout out, feel free to leave your name and age. If you would like to see closed captions, you can press the closed screen, just press the CC button and select show captions. So now I'd like to invite my educators to introduce themselves and we'll get started.
Hi everyone, my name is Becca. My pronouns are she and her, and today we're sharing our favorite dinosaur to get us started. And it's been my favorite dinosaur pretty much all summer long, mainly because we've learned a lot about it recently and learned that it was probably more of an aquatic dinosaur and spent a lot of time eating fish.
Hi everyone, my name is Eric. My pronouns are he, him, and my favorite dinosaur is the T-Rex predator. It has massive teeth. We have 2 full-scale models at the museum that I still stop and kind of look up at every time I go by. It's the best.
Hi everyone, my name is Susan. My pronouns are she and her, and my favorite dinosaur changes all the time. Right now, I would say I'm really into the long neck dinosaurs because I have been on a couple of dinosaur digs and was supposed to go again this summer, and the dinosaur we're digging up happens to be a long neck, possibly an Apatosaurus, but we're not totally sure yet. So Western Apatosaurus.
Great. To start off, I want to do this question from Jacob, age 5, asks, what time period had the most species of dinosaurs living in it? The Cretaceous, Jurassic, or Triassic?
I don't know if we've had that question before. I really like that one. We don't actually know how many species of dinosaurs even existed altogether or at any point. So the main answer is we don't know. But to think a little bit more about it is, if we think now, how many species of birds are there today? How many species of birds were there 1 million years ago? How many species were around 10 million years ago? And there were lots during all those times. Was there, 472 versus 501 or something like that? I don't know that we even know the exact answers for modern day animals, let alone for dinosaurs. Let's just say there were probably hundreds, if not thousands of species in each of those time periods, and I don't know them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I would say that probably the one time period with the least would probably be the Triassic, just because it was pretty early on and dinosaurs actually weren't even around until later in that time period. So while there probably were still quite a few later in that time period, it probably had the least. But again, I don't know which one would have the most.
Great. So Mason asks, why did dinosaurs become extinct?
Well, that's a great question. And it is one of my favorite to talk about, as my friends here know. There are a lot of different theories for why it happened, but the one that is most supported by evidence is that there was some sort of asteroid or meteor that hit the Earth just off of the Yucatan Peninsula, off of Mexico, and it caused a lot of things to happen, many of them being wildfires, even earthquakes, and all sorts of other problems in the local area. But it caused a lot of debris from the actual impact to go up into the sky. And there it blocked out sunlight. Now, not having sunlight meant that plants couldn't really grow as they could before. And so it caused all of these plants to die off. Herbivores that were really large couldn't find enough food, and so they died off. And carnivores that really needed a lot of herbivores to eat, or other carnivores, couldn't really find enough food either. And unfortunately, all of the large dinosaurs did go extinct approximately 65 million years ago because of that.
Isora, age 9, wants to know, what was the first dinosaur we discovered?
I think that it might be the iguanodon. At least I can remember reading stories about that one. The first one that we discovered was probably a lot earlier than that, and we didn't recognize it as a dinosaur because people for a long time didn't think animals could go extinct. So they thought they had just dug up some kind of big dragon or lizard somewhere close by, and they just had never seen one. But one of the earliest stories I can remember is sometime in the middle of the 1800s, there was an iguanodon dug up, which is kind of a tall herbivore dinosaur with these cool thumbs that have kind of a little spike on them. And it started the modern field of paleontology, trying to figure out these animals that were around on the Earth a long time ago. The only evidence we have is of fossils, kind of an imprint of their bones, their skeletons, and trying to figure out what they were like in life. So there's a lot of, around that time, people going out and finding them by the dozens and hundreds in kind of like a dinosaur gold rush to see who could find the most species and discover them and name them. But that was one of the earliest ones I can remember. Someone actually recognizing this was a giant animal that doesn't exist on the Earth anymore, and in fact, in a whole category exists anymore.
And along those lines, Colton, age 7, asks, where do you look for fossils?
So in the United States, the best place to look is in the Western United States. So the important thing for looking for fossils is it needed to be a good place for the fossils to form, the right type of rock, and usually entry rock that forms layers. So there would be a dinosaur that died, and then it would have gotten buried by a layer of rock, and another layer of rock, and a layer of rock, and a layer of rock. But that means that there would be lots of layers on top of it. So not only do you need a place where it would have fossilized, but then you need a place where you can see all those layers of rocks and get down to where the fossils were. So the Western United States is great because it has the right types of rocks. And due to wind and rain, if you've ever been to or seen a picture of the Grand Canyon or Arches National Park and things like that, you can see kind of all those lines there because the wind and rain has washed away the top layers, leaving the layers that are from 65 million to 200 being exposed. Unfortunately, the Northeast isn't great for fossilized dinosaurs. The main reason being is the type of rock. It doesn't really fossilize that great. But the other reason is there's not a lot of rock exposed out there. We have a lot of either roads or cities or forests. And so we don't see a ton of rock exposed. We do have really great dinosaur footprints in New England. That's kind of our claim to fame, all down the Connecticut River Valley. So kind of through central Massachusetts, down through Connecticut, that river valley, there's along there that there are dinosaur footprints that have been found.
Great. So Sylvie, age 10, asks, why are dinosaurs called dinosaurs? And Cece, age 9, asks, what does the word Triceratops mean?
Those are great questions. Those come from Greek, sometimes, or Latin, or really people name them based on where they're found or what they want. But dinosaur itself comes from the Greek word for dainos, or terrible or scary. And saur comes from the word saurus, for lizard. So basically it means scary lizard, which if the iguanodon was the first dinosaur discovered, that's exactly what I would call them too, because they did look like extremely scary lizards at the time. And the word Triceratops is another fun one. That means tri, meaning 3, cera, meaning horned, and tops, meaning head. So 3-horned face, which is incredibly accurate because it does have, in fact, 1, 2, 3 of them.
Very cool. Orlaith, age 5, asks, why do some dinosaurs have tails?
So a lot of the same reasons that modern animals have tails. It probably varied from dinosaur to dinosaur. Some of them might have been used for balance. Some of them might have been used for defense. Maybe some of those long-necked dinosaurs could whip their tails around. So it depended on the dinosaur. Which is small, not really small compared to things that might be able to try to eat it. Still the size of your couch or bigger, but an armored dinosaur that had a tail that ended in a big spiked club that it would use to swing around and defend itself. Other tails on dinosaurs, like maybe the T-Rex, used more to balance out the rest of its body so that it could move around properly.
Peyton, age 5, asks, how do we know that dinosaurs roared if no one was there to hear them?
That's awesome because just last year or the year before, actually even an article about what exactly a T-Rex would have even sounded like, let alone that it would have roared. But the main thing is that we have lots of bones from these dinosaurs. That's how we know the most about them. And by looking at the bones that are in the neck area, we can see that it has for making sound. Now, most animals do make sounds, especially big ones. And so we assume that, like most animals today, they made some sounds. Now, what was really interesting is the way they made the sounds, let's say for Jurassic Park, is tiger, and then they changed the sound that the tiger made to make it sound like the T-Rex. But it turns out, based on where the bones were and what the T-Rex mouth was like and the shape of its throat, that it was a more almost guttural sound, like a really low, I can't even go that low, kind of gurgly sound that is different from the roar of Jurassic Park, but still really intimidating and kind of scary, but definitely like a lower, louder, like resonant sound.
Jacob, age 5, wants to know, was the T-Rex related to sharks or the Megalodon?
That's an Eric question.
Nope, not very closely. So the T-Rex was a dinosaur closely related to modern day birds, more distantly related to things like reptiles. Megalodon is a giant shark that went extinct not as long ago as the dinosaurs did. Megalodon, picture a great white shark and then make that 2 or 3 times bigger. A 50-foot long great white shark with a mouth big enough to swallow a human whole. That lived in the ocean up until maybe just a few tens of thousands of years ago. The only evidence we have of that are its fossilized teeth, which are about this big. We have some at the museum. If you go by some of our exhibits, you can get a look at how big those individual teeth were. But they weren't closely related because Megalodon is a fish, which is in a whole other branch of the tree of life, an entirely different category than the dinosaurs.
Great. Cody, age 10, wants to know, what is the biggest dinosaur?
Ooh, since I've been on the theme of long-necked dinosaurs, so the biggest dinosaur is that we know of is a long-necked dinosaur from South America, most likely as well. And so there's Titanosaurus, Suprasaurus, is that the other one? And Argentinosaurus are all the biggest, most massive, like from tip of their nose all the way out to their tail, 3 school buses long, like 100 something feet. And those were the biggest, and they were plant eaters, which is totally crazy because all they could do all day basically was just eat constantly, just to maintain their, I don't know, how many tons of body?
We're up to 180 tons.
Crazy. So the amount of they'd have to eat like a forest a day or something just to keep themselves going. So those were the biggest meat eaters. That's definitely one of the biggest. Spinosaurus, yeah, Spinosaurus, one of the biggest. Which are also really big. I mean, you don't want to mess with them, but not nearly as big as some of those long necks.
Kaylee wants to know, how many years ago did dinosaurs get extinct? And Amber wants to know, how big was the asteroid that killed all the dinosaurs?
Those are excellent questions. And so the asteroid or meteor hit approximately 65 million years ago. Now, something I didn't mention in my earlier explanation is that the birds are still around. In fact, birds are classified as dinosaurs. So if you think about that, then the time span that dinosaurs have been on Earth have been from approximately 200 million years ago to now. Now, the dinosaurs themselves were around from approximately 200 million years ago to that 65 million year, not include birds, but birds are classified as dinosaurs. So they've been on Earth for a long time. And as far as the size of that asteroid or meteor, it was really large. In fact, it was approximately the size of I believe Boston, is that what we decided it was? The one, it was really, really big. It would have been that to actually create this really large crater off of the Yucatan Peninsula. It's called the Chicxulub crater.
Ben, age 8, wants to know, how do scientists know which dinosaurs were carnivores or herbivores?
Well, if you want to think about how does anyone know if an animal is a meat eater, a carnivore, or a plant eater, an herbivore? And the main way is their teeth. If they're a mouth filled with sharp teeth, I know I can't get call in response to this. If you have a mouth filled with sharp teeth, are you going to be eating meat or are you going to be eating plants? So plant or meat for that, geez. And then if you have a bunch of teeth like your molars, so that are kind of flat and bigger, you're going to be eating plants. And the one thing, probably the amount of fossils we have are teeth. Teeth fossilize great. So we have lots and lots of teeth. Then if you have teeth from the same animal where you see some sharp and some of those flat ones, well, then they're eating meat and plants, an omnivore. And so they eat a little bit of that. So looking at teeth is one of the main ways with even animals, whether they ate plants or meat.
Very cool. All right, let's see. For our next question, a lot of people want to know what the smallest dinosaur is. Or was.
That's a good question. And it's one that has been pretty debated, I guess, and kind of changing around recently. For a long time, it was agreed that the smallest dinosaur was the bee hummingbird, which still exists. It's a bird. It's just super small. But then there was a fossil discovered, that Duntavus congre, that was the smallest dinosaur. It was kind of a little tiny bird-like dinosaur. But then more studies came out and said that maybe that was some type of lizard, some type of reptile, in which case it really wouldn't be classified as a dinosaur anymore. So stay tuned. Maybe we'll learn more.
All right, a lot of people are asking this question, but I'll choose Ava, age 9. How did we know what color dinosaurs were?
So for a long time, it was kind of a guessing game. When you see early illustrations of dinosaurs from the 1900s, they're green and brown and maybe-ish, and it's mostly a guess because early paleontologists were just finding fossils. But as our technology gets better and we're able to look more closely and more carefully excavate and find, we're able to see maybe some impressions of some skin patterns, maybe some more well-preserved fossils, and we're able to find things like evidence in any of them. So not only did they have feathers, but maybe some kind of appearance of what those feathers might look like. So there's a few different ways that we can see not only the color, but the texture of the outside of a dinosaur, what was really there. As our technology gets better, we can get a better idea of what they might. Reconstructions are much more accurate, but still, it's hard to get any information at all, having so much time between the time that the dinosaur died and became a fossil to now. That much time really distorts anything, and color is one of the things that doesn't come through as well.
We can also, again, try and compare them to modern day animals. The first dinosaur, Becca said before, they thought they were more lizard-like. So the early dinosaurs are early pictures of what we thought dinosaurs look more like we see lizards today, those greens and browns and kind of drab colors. But as we realize that they're more closely related to birds, well, birds have tons of different colors. So maybe dinosaurs had lots of different colors as well. And for all the reasons Eric said, we don't know for sure, but I like to think of them as being a little bit more on the colorful side and not as much on the drab side.
So Susan, you just touched on this, and a lot of people are asking these different questions of, are dinosaurs reptiles? Are dinosaurs birds? Someone asked, are they more related to chickens than anything else? Maybe we can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's the question, right? That's the one that everyone sort of been wondering about. And when it comes to reptiles, technically, sort of, dinosaurs are reptiles, mainly because there's a really larger group called the archosaurs that groups reptiles, like crocodiles and all that sort of stuff, and also dinosaurs underneath that. Although dinosaurs are different from the reptiles that we have now, including the crocodiles, turtles, and snakes. They're a different group. But when it comes to birds, birds are dinosaurs. In fact, many of the dinosaurs that made it through that mass extinction, many of the smaller, more avian-like ones, went on to evolve over many millions of years and become our modern day birds, sort of reptiles, and birds are dinosaurs. So I guess birds are sort of reptiles also by that definition. But it's definitely a little bit tricky if you connect everything to that one overarching group. Now, as far as chickens go, yes, they're pretty closely related to different raptors from that time, but pretty much most birds are. So I guess that would be my thought. I don't know if either of you have more thoughts on that.
The reason why a lot of times people will compare a dinosaur to a chicken is because a chicken is one of the most well-studied birds. And so if we're comparing to DNA or to protein or to their structure, the chicken just happens to be one of the most studied. And so it just happens to be the one, if you're going to compare dinosaurs to a modern animal or a modern bird, we know and say chickens.
Great. All right, we have a lot of questions about the T-Rex. So Tasman, age 6, asks, why do T-Rexes have only 2 fingers? A lot of people ask about how sharp a T-Rex teeth is and how fast they run.
So as far as how sharp their teeth were, maybe not razor sharp, maybe not as sharp as you think, because the thing about a T-Rex is it had an amazingly powerful bite. And so you don't need sharp as a steak knife when you have that much pressure biting down with all those teeth. The teeth themselves were 6 inches long, almost the size of a banana, each tooth. So imagine having a mouth full of those, not exactly sharp to a super fine point, but pressure behind them that you're gonna be able to do a lot of damage with those teeth. As far as how fast the T-Rex could move, again, we're not exactly sure. We can make some pretty good guesses based on how the fossil, based on the fossils that we study and how the bones are set up and how we can see how muscles might have attached. It's one of those things that kind of goes back and forth. Was T-Rex a pretty slow moving dinosaur? Could it move as fast as it does in the movies? Could it chase down a human? What do we think, Susan and Becca? What was the most recent verdict? Fast or slow?
I think it was about 35 miles per hour at max. I don't for a long time. That's still pretty fast. Kind of scary.
Muted. And I thought a recent study said that it could have been even slower, like 30, 35 is like, yeah, totally maxed out and probably not for a long time. So maybe not chasing, maybe Jeep in first gear. Once you hit second or third gear, yeah, outrun the T-Rex.
And then I think the other part of the question was, why does it only have 2 fingers? If you look closely at the T-Rex's tiny little arms, they end in 2 fingers. T-Rex didn't do a whole lot of manipulating objects. It wasn't opening doors. It wasn't grabbing fruit from a tree to eat it. But the thing about those arms is we make fun of them because there's teeny little arms. If you go to the Museum of Science and you stand underneath our full-scale T-Rex, the arms are almost as big as me. Those arms are powerful and muscular, and they just happen to be attached to a ridiculously huge, powerful, muscular dinosaur. So they weren't useless. As far as why they end in 2 claws, I'm not exactly sure why it's 2 instead of 3 or 5, but
yeah, I'm not entirely sure either why it would only be 2, but I do know that there are guesses that maybe those 2 claws would be used for grabbing onto something, whether it was prey or another dinosaur, something so that they could just grab on once they, used their powerful jaws, and then they could just eat it.
Awesome. All right. I think for our last question, I saw some questions about the Brontosaurus and the confusion that happened around that. Why was it named and what was the confusion around it?
So first I want to say there is a great podcast on so the Museum of Science has a podcast called Pulsar. And one of the very first podcasts we did with our new relaunch this summer was all about Brontosaurus and where that name comes from. So definitely check that out. That's from back in May, was it, Eric, or something?
Yep.
So check that out on our website, mos.org, Pulsar. But what it was is, so we mentioned earlier that people were scrambling in the late 18 and early 1900s to find new dinosaurs and name them as fast as they could. So they found a long-necked dinosaur and named it Apatosaurus. They found it, great, yep, new one, named it Apatosaurus. Found another one, named it Brontosaurus. Okay, another one. But then they realized that the Brontosaurus was, and you go with the name that came first. Well, I don't know about you, but I grew up knowing of Brontosaurus and not Apatosaurus. So why did we keep the wrong one? By the time I grew up in the 80s, 90s, Brontosaurus should have been gone from our vocabulary, but it turned out that right after Brontosaurus was discovered, the Museum of Natural History in New York City made the first most amazing dinosaur exhibit ever. And the centerpiece of this exhibit was a Brontosaurus. And they'd already named it and put it up and had it set, and it was Brontosaurus. And then I think they had Brontosaurus, but it was too late. Brontosaurus became known everywhere, even though it didn't exist. But it turns out that just about 5 years ago, people did a huge study looking at Apatosaurus evidence, and they compared the two and showed, you know what? Maybe they are two different dinosaurs. So once again, there is an Apatosaurus and there is a Brontosaurus, and they are back, and you can know both of them.
And including everything Susan just said, I'd just like to add the fun fact of what they're named. Really fun names. The Apatosaurus means a sneaky lizard creature. That's where we get the saurus from, like dinosaur. But I'm not so sure how sneaky it would be. It's still a giant long neck dinosaur. It cannot sneak around. But the Brontosaurus, more aptly named, means thunder lizard, which, you know, as it's walking around, it probably sounded like. It is very fun names. I mean, I just wanted to add that to the whole story of the Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus.
All right, well, that is a really cool story, but we are out of time for today. So wave goodbye, say your goodbyes.
Hi, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
And I do just want to say thank you, everyone, for asking those amazing questions and being thoughtful scientists today. We did have over 130 questions unanswered, so I'm really sorry that we didn't get to everyone's questions today, but hopefully you can tune in to another Dinosaur Ask a Science. And if you would like to see more of our programs, you can head to mos.org/MOS at home. That's also where you can find the podcast about the Brontosaurus that Susan had mentioned. And if you enjoyed today's program and would like to support the museum, you can visit engage.mos.org/. Thank you all so much, and I hope to see you next time. Have a great afternoon.